Morning, everyone. Welcome to our fabulous Water Authority Water District building. If you're thirsty, we have plenty of it. And I see you have it on your tables. We're so excited to have you join us today. And please put your cell phones either on air mode, air pilot mode, or silent so we won't be disturbed during the meeting. And so, the January 31st, 2018 special City Council meeting is called to order. This meeting has been properly noticed and posted in compliance with the open meeting law. For public comment related to items on the agenda, citizen participation, and public hearing items, we have available a speaker card which you may complete and submit to the city clerk. Where is the city clerk? Over there, Luann Holmes. Cards are around the meeting room, and if you did not submit a card, it doesn't prevent you from speaking under public comment or citizen participation. Before we proceed with the agenda, would everyone please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance? Here we are. Okay. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay. You can eat. It's fine. I don't mind. Okay. Are we in compliance with the open meeting law? Thank you very much. And we did our pledge. I should have asked the other one first. Public comment during this portion of the agenda must be limited to matters on the agenda for action. The amount of time any single speaker is allowed may be limited. All comments made will be cross-referenced to those specific items. And if anyone submitted a speaker card who wishes to speak under this portion of the agenda, please come to the podium, state your name for the record. Masses are coming. Okay. We will move on to agenda item number 5. For possible action, discussion regarding City of Las Vegas strategic priorities, all wards. And our wonderful city manager, Mr. Adams, you're up.
All right. So it is my distinct pleasure to introduce our distinguished facilitator, Poonam Mathur. Poonam operates her own business as a speaker, trainer, and writer. She facilitated our 2014 City Council retreat, where the Council defined its top priorities. She facilitated the stakeholder meeting that we held on January 18, 2018, that preceded this event as part of our strategic planning process. Poonam is the executive director of the Elaine P. Wynn and Family Foundations. She's held executive positions at NV Energy, MGM Mirage, and the Las Vegas Chamber of Commerce. She's received numerous appointments to statewide leadership positions by Nevada's last 4 governors. And in 2013, she was named among the top 100 influential women in Las Vegas by My Vegas magazine. So it is my distinct pleasure to welcome Poonam Mathur.
Can you hear me? Not really. Can you hear me now? Is it working now? No. This, is that because you like my outfit? Or it is been done. All right, we're going to do it this way. Good morning, everybody. It is an honor to be here. Thank you for the invitation. As a member of the community, I also want to begin by expressing deep gratitude to members of City Council who do this because they care. And so for your leadership, for the devotion that it represents, thank you. And we're going to have an awesome day. The goal is to get you out of here by 12:40, 1 o'clock. We don't have lunch ordered, so we think that the anti-Pavlovian strategy is going to be successful. Very good. And so let me just do a little bit of table setting, and then we're going to present a little bit of food for thought as we kick off the morning. We've got a pretty clear objective for the day, and that is to hopefully
walk out of this room with clarity from you about the strategic direction for the city of Las Vegas for the next 3 to 5 years. That's the goal. That's where we're, so if we backward map from there, Scott's going to go into this in a bit more detail, but here's sort of the larger context. For me, the thing that seems to make sense is to look at it like a baseball game. So we're rounding third, heading for home. First step, first base in the strategic planning process were your managers and directors. And they contemplated and considered what had happened previously. Second base were the group of stakeholders who spent a half a day contemplating and thinking. Third base was survey input from your residents. All of that becomes your starting point today. And just so you're aware, if we just do a quick tally count, head count of how many people have participated so far, it's over 1,000 people through the first 3 phases. And I was reminded of what my late father used to tell me as a chemical engineering professor. He would remind us constantly that only 9% of our brain was able to flash or fire at any instant in time. And the wisdom that he offered consistently was, therefore, when you're making big decisions, make sure there are at least 9 other people around the table. You're worth the whole brain. And so the good news for you as leaders is you've got about 100 brains that have already contributed to this activity so far. So that's the first thing. The second thing, the question that we hope anchors and drives today is very simple. What should the City of Las Vegas prioritize in its strategic plan for the coming 3 to 5 years? That's what we're seeking to answer. And so to kick us off, I want to begin with you. It's important to sort of think about the future, right? To lift our heads up beyond all that is important and urgent today, to contemplate something over the horizon. So to have you help us do that, I'm going to ask each of you to share one adjective. And the adjective is one that you hope will best describe the city of Las Vegas 5 years from now. And I'm not going to call on any of you because then you will be freaked out. So I'm going to let you, whoever's got an adjective.
Thank you, Poonim. Thank you for doing this for us. It's always great to see you, and you're a big source of energy for our community, and it's great to have you here today.
Yeah, that was a lot more than one word, Councilman. One word adjective, and I love you and thank you. One word adjective. 5 years from now, the city of Las
Action.
Vegas.
I'd like Las Vegas to be known for taking action, being a city of action,
Great.
being progressive in our thoughts and moving forward. When somebody comes forward with a concept, we just do it.
Action. Thank you.
Action.
Vibrant.
Vibrant. Thank you.
Loftier.
Loftier. Thank you.
Growth.
Growth. Growth. Thank you. Steady. Thank you. Okay, that was great. Now let's get started. You ready to do some work? We're going to start by giving you some food for thought. In case you didn't already enjoy the buffet, more food coming here. And this is, it's my privilege actually to introduce our keynote speaker. Vishaan Chakrabarti is his name. And there won't be a quiz, but it's fun when you get it. So a little bit about Vishaan. He's a registered architect and founder of an organization called Practice for Architecture and Urbanism. He's associate professor of practice at Columbia University's Graduate School of Architecture, Planning, and Preservation. He was previously director of the Manhattan office for the New York Department of City Planning. He is an author, having scribed a book called A Country of Cities, a Manifesto for Urban America. He has got some really impressive academic credentials, Master of Architecture from UC Berkeley, as well as Master of City Planning from MIT, and dual bachelor's degrees in Art History and Engineering from Cornell. So that's a lot of impressive T-shirts that hang in his closet. He also is smart in his travel plans. He was here last February, living in New York. January and February are cold there. And so last February, he was here serving as a keynote speaker for the Mayor Symposium on Urban Design at UNLV. And today he is here avoiding very cold weather in New York again. He has been described many times as a game-changing architect and urban planner. Here to present to you some thoughts, to give you some food for thought. Please welcome our keynote speaker, Vishaan Chakrabarti.
Thank you so much. Good morning, everyone, Mayor, City Council members. Thank you, everyone, for inviting me. It's really an honor, as you set your strategic priorities, to be a part of that process. And as a former government official, I have to tell you, I mean, I think this is such an important thing that you're all doing. It's very, very important for cities, I believe, to have a clear and unified vision. Not always do everyone agree, but I think good minds can do extraordinarily great things when they're brought together 9 or 10 or more. I was asked to sort of give you some broader thoughts, maybe to help set the stage for your morning this morning, and I'm going to dive right in. And the title is Designing for the Future of the City. And one, obviously I'm an architect, so we talk about design all the time, but I really believe that all of us are designers, and especially in terms of what you're doing. And by that, what I mean is design is simply a process by which we think about a future that does not exist. So as we think about the adjectives that you just laid out, it's all about sort of future setting. It's all about saying, how do we get from here to there? And so what I'm going to try to do is lay out both some international trends and some national trends around some of those same questions. And hopefully that will be food for thought as you move forward into your morning. I wanted to start, because the news is so crazy these days, with some good news, which is that really since the 1980s, the world has been becoming more wealthy. About a couple of billion people have moved into the middle class since the 1980s. And what that means is that virtually every municipality in the world is dealing with growth at some level. And so you are not alone in some of the questions that are before you. This is a very common thing that's happening around the world. And associated with that, there is this idea that somehow the world is now more urban than rural. Somewhere around 2007, the shift happened. But what I actually see is the in-between, which is to say that as the world grows and you have more people gaining wealth around the world, that what I see everywhere I go is this, which is a certain degree of sprawl, of a lot of unplanned growth, growth without infrastructure, growth that actually is going to create tremendous resource constraints for our children and our grandchildren. And what I mean by that is, even if you live in a suburban home and love living in the suburbs, God bless you, I'm not trying to criticize that, but at the same time, ask yourself, if 2 or 3 billion people around the world all live in big houses with big cars and irrigated deserts, what that means for the resources of the planet. And I would argue that it's a very challenging thing, which is why I'm a big believer in cities. I wrote this book a few years ago called A Country of Cities, and it was really directed at the United States and the idea that the United States could really be a world leader in talking about a different kind of urbanization going forward into the 21st century. And that it could really be much more a country of cities. And I wrote this book actually specifically not so much about the cities we see in the movies all the time, the New Yorks and the LAs and San Franciscos, but actually cities that are trending forward, are growing, places like Las Vegas that I think are going to set the stage about whether we're going to grow smartly or not. And so I'm going to talk a lot this morning about density, but I want to be clear that I don't mean density just for the sake of building density. This is a picture from Dubai, where you now see the world's tallest building. I'm still not sure exactly why it's there. But I was raised to understand that skyscrapers were built when you had a scarcity of land. That's why Manhattan is so tall. It's an island, right? This is just sort of growing for the sake of growth, and it's a kind of different model than what I mean. What I mean are more places like London, which cities like London and cities like this that are very transit dependent actually have an extraordinarily low carbon footprint, because most people live and work in fairly small dwellings. They take mass transit or walk or bicycle to work. And so even though this doesn't look very green, it's actually extremely green in terms of how people use resources. And that's true not only at the big city scale of a place like London, it's true in a Japanese farming village, or the village where my father was born in India, where the farmers actually, unlike in this country, the farmers live in these small clusters. And if you look at that picture and you understand the infrastructure that those farmers kind of depend on, it's all strung along a spine, right? So there's one sewer line, one gas line, one road. Everyone's a tributary off that. So it's not this thing of having to get that infrastructure out to every farmhouse. So whether you're talking about this at the scale of the village or the scale of the city, the same kind of lessons apply. In the book, I talk a lot about this idea of eco-density or hyperdensity, which is the density that's sufficient to support some kind of rail-based mass transit. And a lot of times people misconstrue what I'm saying as meaning that we should be building skyscrapers everywhere, and that's not what I'm saying. Actually, most transportation planning experts agree that you only need a density of about 30 dwelling units per acre in order to support light rail. And that's not, that's a kind of townhouse density. It's not, huge buildings, and it's still where there's plenty of nature, plenty of green or open sky and things that I think people very much treasure. And what's really interesting is at that density level, all 7 billion people on the planet could fit in the state of Texas. And so I'm not suggesting that we all move to Texas, but I am suggesting that we use a lot more land on this earth than we necessarily need to use to live in a way that's both environmentally friendly as well as socially conducive to a good life. Whoops, this is not loaded. All right, I'm just going to skip it. What's interesting is that kind of dense living, of being based on rail or some kind of infrastructure, demands investment in infrastructure. And I know that's some of the things that you're going to be debating here this morning, is how do you allocate your resources. And the last time we saw at the federal level a major investment in infrastructure was in 1956, with President Eisenhower and the passage of the Federal Highway Act. It is still to this day the largest federal expenditure in nationwide infrastructure. It was done both as a response to the Cold War, so people could evacuate cities quickly, so we could move ICBMs around, but also, frankly, to kind of de-densify our cities and to really create a lot of the suburban landscape that we know today. And so, whether you love suburbs or don't, one of the key things I'm trying to bring to light here is that a lot of the landscape we have was due to federal intervention, including things not just like the Highway Act, but the GI Bill, the mortgage interest deduction, a bunch of things that fueled a kind of de-densification of the country. That coupled with, since the Federal Highway Act, we've actually seen almost no investment in infrastructure from the federal level, either for new capital projects or for state of good repair or maintenance. This, you may say, even if you're a very conservative person and say you don't want the government spending money on things like this, I would encourage you to look at what our competitors are doing worldwide. I just came back from a family vacation in Calcutta where there's a fabulous new subway system. Across Asia, they're building high-speed rail. People are moving around in much more efficient ways. There's far less air congestion in our airports. And so we are losing our competitive advantage because of the lack of investment in infrastructure. So, I'm glad to see this being debated at the national level, but it clearly, for all of you who are trying to set municipal policy, is a very big deal. And what it really comes down to is that if you look at the federal budget, we spend much more on roads. Everyone, for some reason, thinks that a new road and a good road and a road without potholes should be free. And yet we question the money that we put into light rail or subway, and we say, well, that's a subsidy. And it's so interesting that we frame those conversations differently, as if it's our God-given right to drive on a free road, but that we should somehow have to, think about things like rail as subsidy. Similarly, when you look at the amount of money we put into renewables versus the amount of money that actually the federal government puts into the oil and gas industry, it's extraordinary. So what I'm saying is we've actually put our fingers on the scale in terms of what transportation modes and what kind of density patterns that we live in. And as a consequence, you've actually seen over the course from the end of the 19th century, beginning of 20th century, to the turn of the 21st century, you saw an enormous drop in density in cities nationwide. The country was actually much denser prior to all of these policies being put into place. And I would argue that as a consequence of that, in the 20th century, what we created was a great deal of isolation. We created bubbles. We created isolated gated communities, isolated academic campuses, isolated corporate headquarters with highways that separated us. And I think there's been a lot of detrimental effects that come from that. Another slide that didn't load. And one of the places I think this is really coming to impact not just millennials, but people like empty nesters, is people are looking at what it means to drive from place to place. I drove here from my hotel this morning on I-15, and I was really struck by the amount of traffic there was at 7:30 in the morning. But, you know, the road rage, drinking while driving, texting while driving, these things that we hear about all the time. Why are people texting while they're driving? They're texting while they're driving because they're bored. They're sitting in a traffic jam. Now, I'm driving to Phoenix later today, and I made that decision because I love driving on the open road in the American West. That's a great experience. That's not the same thing as being stuck in a traffic jam on I-15 at 8 in the morning. And we shouldn't conflate those two experiences. So I think a lot of people and a lot of young people, when you talk about attracting human capital to your city, are veering towards places where they can use some form of mass transit, and especially light rail or a bicycle, because they want to spend more of their time with their friends and their loved ones. They don't want to spend their time in traffic jams. There are other interesting statistics. The one that it just didn't load was there's a Swedish study about the fact that absence does not make the heart grow fonder. It's actually data that shows us that as people have longer commute times, their divorce rates increase. There's data from the American Medical Association that shows that as you commute longer hours, you actually have a higher prevalence towards obesity and all the public health issues associated with that because of just the lack of activity associated with sitting in a car all day. And then there's the flip side of the equation, which is now, so a number of people like me and other people around the country are talking about how we need to create more walkable communities. But one of the things that is a cautionary tale is we're finding that more walkable communities are becoming more expensive. They are actually becoming more attractive, and as a consequence, there's reason to be concerned about things like gentrification. And so that's something that we're looking out for in a lot of major cities today, especially this question of affordable housing. A house that's affordable means that you're spending only a third of your gross income or less on your house. Or your apartment. And by that standard, we've had an almost 40% loss of affordable housing since World War II nationwide. Housing is very expensive for people, and this thing of promoting these more walkable places has this potential downside where these places become so attractive that they're pricing people out. And so that's something that I think every municipality has to look out for. And so in the book I talk about not just infrastructure, but this idea of what I call an infrastructure of opportunity. So meaning that we need to invest not only in traditional infrastructure like road and rail and airports and sewage and electricity, but things like affordable housing, healthcare, culture, things that create social mobility. And so that as cities grow, and cities are growing nationwide, most cities in this country are actually doing quite well. There is not carnage, as some people would have us believe, but cities are actually doing quite well. But the problem with that is they are pricing people out. And this is something that we all need to be very concerned about and make sure that we're creating social mobility. And why make all those investments? And why refer to them as investments instead of subsidies? And the reason is very simple. That in this country, about 3% of the land mass of the United States generates 90% of the gross domestic product and 87% of our jobs. Meaning that it's not that agricultural areas are incredibly valuable to the economy. Of course they are, right? But if you look at where the economy is really humming, especially the technology and innovation economies, it's in our cities. And so as we make the right investments in our cities, we can plan on having huge increases in tax base. New York City, for example, we made a lot of investments when I worked under the Bloomberg administration. Our budget went from $43 billion to $78 billion in terms of the amount of discretionary money we have to spend on things like parks and mass transit and affordable housing. We still have all sorts of problems, but we think that's a very important thing, that kind of payback. The other thing we're seeing in cities in terms of this growth of tax base is a shift from one-trick pony towns. Meaning it used to be that New York was about finance, or Philadelphia was about education, and Washington was about power. With the tech sector in particular, that's changing. And I heard one of the adjectives was loftier. And it's interesting that that adjective, because I think Vegas, like many cities, has the opportunity to have a much more diverse economy than maybe what people have stereotyped it to have. And that's what we are seeing nationwide, that places like Kansas City and other places that you didn't think were sort of tech hotbeds and other places are attracting that human capital. Look at Austin. It was never a place that was considered a capital for that kind of growth. And so this is something that's very important. The other thing that's interesting about that is the density, and we have data that supports this. The density actually supports innovation. And what I mean by that is, as people are clustered more closely together, as they run into each other in supermarkets and bars and parks, they create new ideas. And we can tell that from there is a correlation between the filing of new patents and denser areas. And so this is a very interesting thing. And it means that actually we're moving away from the office park, where you have this idea that a corporation's out in some headquarters, out in the highway somewhere. And the reason companies and young people especially don't want to work that way anymore is they want to run into other people in their industries, and maybe even in different industries, because that's what's generating innovation worldwide. And so it's interesting, in Barcelona they have this idea called human speed. And what they mean by human speed is today about 30% of Barcelona walks to work. They want about 50% of the city to walk to work. And the way they're inducing that is they're making a much more mixed-use environment, because they believe that as people walk, they contemplate, they innovate, they run into each other, and they actually live a sort of more contemplative life. And as a consequence, the economy grows, which is a kind of mind-blowing idea if you think about it. It's kind of simple in one level, but incredibly sophisticated in another. So I wanted to shift a little bit from those more abstract ideas and take you through a couple of examples, some that are very New York-based from my time as Manhattan Planning Director, others from other parts of the world. Some of you, if you've been to New York, you may have been to the High Line. When I worked for Mayor Bloomberg, we passed the rezoning around the High Line, which was this air rights transfer. That's what that cartoon is at the bottom of the slide. And an enormous new neighborhood has sprung up around the High Line. Now, this was the old meatpacking district. Never in a million years in 2000 would we imagine that this could have happened in our city. But we have some of, Barry Diller's office is there, Diane von Furstenberg's office is there, from fashion to technology, Google's headquarters. Google spent $1.8 billion on their building just 2 blocks from this slide. Some of I don't know why that's happening with the occasional slide, but some extraordinary amount of new housing that's being built. And of course, again, as that is happening, our tax base is growing, and that gives us the ability to invest in all sorts of things we couldn't have imagined. But the other thing that it highlights for me is this idea that we used to think of big cities as just these places filled with kind of glassy skyscrapers. But what I'm seeing more and more of is the combination of those business districts with what I consider to be these kind of global villages, these other nodes within cities that love to be attached to the big city, but also have their own smaller community that is both part of the bigger trend, but also its own community. And I think that is a great way to tackle what I think of as the 3 big challenges of our time. Climate change, social inequity, and technological processing power, which is, I know like some of you are going to talk about things like autonomous vehicles later. I'm going to touch on that as well. I think that's both a great thing and a potentially dangerous thing if we're not cautious about how we adapt to new technology. And so I think that idea of the global village is a great sort of platform, that the city is a great platform to think about those 3 things. And what it's trending towards geographically, and I get the sense this is happening in Las Vegas as well, is after World War II, most of our cities were hub-and-spoke cities. We had this idea that there was a downtown, and everyone commuted out from the downtown to their respective bedroom communities. What we've shifted to is a much more multinodal city. Most cities that I go to today have multiple business districts, not just one. Different technologies are advancing that idea, and I think that that trend is only going to move further and further, where we're going to see many more mixed-use neighborhoods, far fewer bedroom communities, where work and play and living are all going to happen in the same geography. Not sure why that's happening, but okay. I'm going to just give you a couple of examples from our office of that idea of that more networked city. This is, I don't know why this didn't download. Sorry. We tested the first few slides, but okay. All right, there you go. So one of the reasons I brought these particular examples is I think one of the things we tend to do is always focus on the new. And yet every city has its history. Every city has things that you might walk by and think it's not so charming, not so great, and yet could be turned into something extraordinary. This is an old sugar refinery in Brooklyn. It's a city landmark. But as you can see, the inside's a bit dark, a bit bleak. And our task was to turn this into new tech office space. And our idea was to insert kind of a new building into the old one with this gap of light between the new building and the old. And so if this was the historic condition of the building, sorry. Don't know why these didn't download. Human speed, yeah. Okay, we're just going to do the best we can with the slides we can get up. So this was the cross-section of the building. So this is this old refinery, and the whole idea is it was this building that, you know, we looked at other precedents of these buildings that were old industrial buildings that just had equipment in them. And so our insert is this new office building. And so the reason I'm showing you this is because 20 years ago, the idea of an office building sitting in an old factory like this in New York City was unthinkable. You'd always be building a glass skyscraper in Midtown Manhattan somewhere. But that's not where our young people want to work. They want to be in different places, and they want to be in funkier places. And so this is what this building is going to look like. It just got approved through the Landmarks Commission. It's still inside is as high-tech as any other office building might be in Midtown, and it can accommodate a variety of different client types. This is the way to make sure you get through the presentation on time. I was very worried about that. There's a lot of gentlemen with guns in here. Right? It's on the waterfront in Brooklyn. I'm so sorry. I don't know why this is happening, but let me try to. Really? See, what I need right now is my 15-year-old. Where's the computer? Keep going and see if I can get to a slide. Okay, well, you know what? So we're just going to have to go without slides. That's okay. So the examples I was going to show you today, and I actually think it's okay, because at least we got through the first part, and I think the first part is the more sort of general lessons. The bigger issue in terms of the examples was I was going to show you some things from New York. This is actually here we go. This is in Newark. This is in Newark, New Jersey. This is a housing project, and I thought it would be a good thing to show because I know you're debating a lot of multifamily housing, and in Newark they don't have a lot of multifamily housing. This is by a train station. It's about 700 units of housing. the big point in showing you all of these places that exist is, my sense is that, having especially come here last year, that your traditional downtown, I think, has a lot of assets in it that maybe people walk by every day and don't appreciate. I was hoping to get to this slide. Well, so this is some of the new housing that they're building in Germany, and there's some of the things that we were looking at for this project. My point is just on this, what's interesting about this housing project is because it's in New Jersey, it's competing against the suburban housing market. And we think it's going to do very well, and we think it's going to do very well because of the features that are in it. This is not expensive housing. This is for the New York region. It's probably some of the cheapest apartment housing you can rent. Boy, I just don't know why this is happening with some slides and not others. But it seems to me that the potential to look at some of those older areas and invest in multifamily housing, invest in light rail, invest in the things that will make the city more connected are very important. Another project I was going to show you is up in Harlem, which is actually a very small little building that the city is investing in to build a project that has about 20 artist studios, 2 dance rehearsal studios, and video editing. I think along with the major investments in things like light rail, that doing those more finer grained cultural investments are also extraordinarily important. And sometimes cities have these gritty little hidden jewels that you can find, and they are worth investing in, because what I find is, especially for younger people, but also, you know, again, things like empty nesters, that you can end up creating a much finer grained sense of culture by investing in some of those smaller kinds of buildings and things like that. Another thing I wanted to show you was we are in the middle of a subway shutdown on one of our major lines in New York City, and we are about to, we have to, because we're being forced to, we're going to take cars off the street above which the subway runs on and run express buses. And we are now proposing for the first time to bring light rail into Manhattan. Because even though Manhattan has a very extensive subway system, that subway system was built around that World War II diagram that I showed you of hub and spoke. And people aren't commuting hub and spoke anymore. We have a lot of people that are commuting from one borough to the other without touching downtown. And that's creating all sorts of new traffic patterns and new traffic problems. And so one of the things that's true of almost every major city, so in New York, about 30% of our city is road. I bet in Vegas that number's higher. I would put to you that that's maybe not the most efficient use of the territory of your space, and that you could potentially look at using some of that existing roadway for both high-speed bus, if you're not doing that already, as well as light rail, if you're not doing that already. And I think, we're going to start from the beginning? Yeah. We were, try about 40 or 50. Yeah, 50's fine. Okay, so let's see if it'll, yeah, so that's more of the factory. Oh, great. At least it works this way. Thank you. Thanks, Tori. So, look, I want to be cognizant of time. So these were just some more images of the sugar factory. One of the things that our government focuses on a great deal, so this went through Landmarks Commission and some work with city planning, is how buildings meet the street to create a more pedestrian environment. And I think that's essential. Now, I know in a lot of cities in America, and especially a lot of Western cities, it's a very auto-oriented place. We don't always focus on the pedestrian. But I think if you can, in the pockets, like I said, those little global villages, those little pockets of activity, if you can generate just some level of pedestrian activity. So what this drawing is showing is how that big, huge factory is associating with about 6 acres of park space around it. And the whole idea is to get people out of their cars, using the parks, and really using the inside of the building kind of seamlessly with the outside of the building. And so these are the kinds of things. So these drawings aren't just done for, architecture magazines. They're done for municipal review. And we're trying to show how welcoming and inviting, especially, again, the ground floor of a building like this can be. And so that's something that we think is quite important. Great. This is the project in Harlem. This is this existing building, and this reminds me of some of your buildings in your old downtown. And you might look at it and you say, what's so great about this? But what's interesting is everything has great bones if you just look for the bones. When you go inside this building, it has these great industrial skylights. And those are the pop out of the skylights, and it's across the street from the Apollo Theater in Harlem, a very important place in our city's history. And so these are the artist studios I was mentioning. We're building kind of a public street in the building. This is a city-sponsored project for a nonprofit called Spaceworks. Dance rehearsal studios, video editing. And I just wanted to show you this because some of the other projects I'm showing are very large scale, but this is, just a small grain project. Little things, like this is a very limited budget project. So we're taking the loading dock and also using that as a hangout stoop for people to kind of be in the street. Brick, very important, like understanding how the materials can actually say that this is an institution. So this facade's going to get converted from this to that. And really try to invite the public in for different art exhibits and so forth. So it's amazing what you can do with these little kind of jewels in the rough. Newark, this is this housing project, not about sort of isolated suburban living, but also not about isolated urban living, and trying to create a different model, which is this more communal model where a lot's going on the ground floor, courtyard typologies to bring people into courtyards. It's related to the waterfront and mass transit. And I showed you this before. This is some of the housing that was a precedent for us. This is in Berlin. Berlin is not an incredibly wealthy city. It's building, I think, some of the most extraordinary housing in the world right now. And it feels this is near a riverfront. There's a playground outside. It feels very, very public in the way it's done, courtyards. This is great. Talk about low-cost infrastructure. This is a food hall in Copenhagen. It's nothing but a concrete floor where local people drive their food trucks in. So you don't have to build any kitchen infrastructure. It's just a bunch of local food trucks. And suddenly you've got buzz and you've got a sense of community. So just this housing project that I was telling you about earlier. So this is, again, where there's been almost no multifamily housing. This is a 15-story building, brick. It has a food market down at the bottom. To bring costs down, the bathrooms and kitchens are going to be built modularly. One of the things I find in markets that are just turning to multifamily housing is the budgets are very constrained. And so understanding how to do this also really helps with local employment in terms of the ability to set up kind of these modular factories, prefabrication, and so forth. And then fairly small units. And so as a consequence, you create interesting social moments, like the laundry room where people are waiting to do their laundry. Like, can you put a ping pong table in there and actually suddenly create social space? And that's very important for multifamily housing, so that it doesn't feel like this kind of nameless, faceless environment, but actually a place where people can get together. I think this is my last one. This is a very different project. This is in Ulaanbaatar, Mongolia. I was just there in November. This is the coldest capital in the world, but it reminded me of Vegas in a couple of ways, believe it or not. I actually think there is gambling, but that wasn't the thing. The thing that reminded me of Vegas is it's surrounded by mountains, and the mountains you can see the mountains from everywhere, and it's very, very beautiful from that perspective. And our site's right in the heart of downtown, and the site's owned by the National Amusement Park of Mongolia. It's an interesting client. That's the National Amusement Park just to the south, just the bottom of the slide. And this whole site's about making, again, pedestrian connections. People largely drive in this part of the world. This is a coal economy. It's very cold. And what's interesting is, so this client came to us and said, we don't want to build a shopping mall because Mongolians love nature. They love camping, and they don't like to be controlled by their environment. And shopping malls are all about controlling people. And so they fail. And so what we want to build is an open-air bazaar. Now, mind you, this is a place where in the winter it's about -10 on average. And yet, You know, when we were there, people walk around with like a light down jacket. They're used to it, and they like being outside. So this program calls for all of this local retail, very few chain stores, small apartments, and a small office space above. And it includes things like a folk theater, and I love this, a haunted house. I think it's going to be the only haunted house I ever get to design. But what's interesting is, and again, I brought this because I think this is such a different paradigm for how you build something. So they said, here's this big site. It's about 10 acres. We're going to put all the parking underneath, and we want everything to be pedestrian up above. And instead of building these huge mammoth structures, we're going to build like a series of about 30 or 40 buildings. And the whole idea is to create an almost nomadic experience in the city. We're going to geothermally heat it, including the outdoors, so we bring it to some bearable temperatures. And so the cars will start in the winter. But the whole idea is you have these little buildings with things going on in them, geothermal heat, and then this ring of mountains and this beautiful light. And this does remind me of Vegas, just that big sky and how important that is to the identity of the place. And so we started actually designing these buildings echoing the mountains. And thinking about how they too could look like some of the mountain topography that's around them. So these are relatively small buildings, very human scale. And so this would be kind of like, this is just an abstract collage of what these things could be like. But the whole point is they're echoing the place. And so this is something that I think is extremely important as every city grows around the world, which is how do you create a physical environment that doesn't feel like it could belong anywhere? And, you know, I think that as cities grow, it's very important that places don't become more anonymous. Every place has its own personal identity, culture, geography, topography, climate, and those things, how you draw upon those things and make the growth feel organic to the place, I think is an absolutely critical challenge for us in the 21st century. It's the challenge that I kind of see everywhere. So I think, so this is the bus thing I was going to show. I just want to flip to, this is a piece of, I'm just going to flip to something, because we lost some time in there, just to close. So I really believe that in terms of at least the natural resource concerns that the world is facing, that cities are our last and best hope, because they really bring people together in a unique way, and every city is different. And what's interesting, and these are I promise, my last couple of slides, there's a lot of talk about how technology is going to change cities, and especially things like autonomous vehicles and so forth. And we're doing some work with some of these technology companies, and I find the research fascinating. What this slide is trying to show you is a kind of street of the future, and this is also in a very this is in a very cold climate. And so what that canopy is up above is it's a retractable canopy that would actually give you some warmth during the winter months and then can open up during the summer months. But what I'd like you to notice is the importance of the autonomous vehicle is not so much that the autonomous vehicle is there, but because if it lives up to its promise, it doesn't hit people and so forth, it knows what to do, that's the promise, then streets can be entirely different. You don't need curbs, right? If you're moving around in a wheelchair, it can be a completely different experience. So the whole idea of the street as this continuous surface moving out from buildings, I think could be this very, very different experience from what we understand today and what we built in the 20th century in response to the invention of the automobile. So I think we're at a kind of technological inflection point, and I encourage everyone to think about what that technology could mean for their city. So with that, I just want to close. I'm sorry very much for the technological glitch. Hopefully there's some time for some Q&A, and I hope that helped provide some food for thought. Thank you.
Thank you.
So we've got time for questions.
Now, how would you like to
Pose
proceed?
them
I mean,
away.
I think the food for thought you've given us, and just so exciting, with the background in anthropology, sociology, and education, and a human behaviorist. We have seen in our city the younger folk coming in technologically, connected, going into the smallest space to live. Then as they have families, wanting to take those families away and get out. And then as they age through and the children move on, they want the convenience of the connectivity
Right.
back in the
Right.
city.
Right.
So I don't know, looking at Las Vegas and realizing, and I know you've read Delivering Happiness by Tony Hsieh, who's the king of connectivity and bumping into each other, has delivered that message loud and clear to us, and we've seen it materialize
Right.
here. Some thoughts about that whole human development, behavior, progress through life.
I think you've hit the nail on the head, Mayor. And we all see this in every city, that cities are great for young people and great for older people, and what's tough is the in-between with kids because people need more space. But the driving factor there is schools, right? Because every parent, I'm a parent, we all have the same exact concern, right? Which is, once you have kids, where are they going to go to school? Are you going to put them in a decent school? And, in a city like New York, our public schools, my son goes to public school. It's a very good public school. We're very fortunate. There's no way we would stay in New York City if we didn't have good school options for our children. And I think that's paramount. And then after that, flowing from that, obviously, where can you recreate with your kids? Can you get the space you need? Now, and what's interesting to me about that is I think there is a little bit of a misconception about the space kids need. And I think this is an important part of your question. So my sister for years lived in Bethesda, Maryland, which is sort of like, it's the king of all suburbs. And I would go out onto her deck on a beautiful summer or spring morning on a Saturday, and I'd look outside, and I don't know how many of you have this experience if you live in a suburban town, and there are no kids. There are no kids playing. There are no kids on their bikes. I think they're largely down in the cellar playing video games. But the other thing that's happened is people are very fearful about their kids getting abducted, even in like wealthy suburbs. I was a free-range kid. You don't see free-range kids anymore. And so what's interesting to me is I've seen in a lot of big cities, we raised our children in New York, that the shared playground and park, if it's well kept, is a much better space than the individual backyard. Because what I find is most kids get pretty bored with their own backyard inside of the first 10 minutes of being there. And they also want to be with their friends. And so I think it's easier to solve the how do you keep millennials in your city, how do you attract empty nesters. There's a lot of obvious attractors. But the middle ground to me is about schools and public spaces that really work for kids.
Thank you. Great question. It also amplifies, just so you know, the city of Las Vegas has been remarkably cutting edge and proactive in education.
Mm-hmm.
So good for you. Councilman?
Thank you. So great presentation. It was
Thank
very
you.
interesting. I wanted to get your reaction to one area you spoke a lot about, transportation.
Yeah.
So I represent a ward that is all the way to the west end of the valley. It's all the way up against the mountain. There's really nothing else you can build up there, but it's quite a ways up there. And the typical person that lives up there is kind of like me and my wife. We get up in the morning and we get in our cars and off we go, and that's what I want. I want to get in my car and go wherever I want and park wherever I want, and most of the people up there are like that, and what they want to make sure is that they have great roads and they're safe and the roads are expanded and that sort of thing. So then we talk a lot about public transportation and light rail and buses, and we need to kind of get more people into those kind of modes. But we build HOV lanes and nobody uses them. They're empty. We send buses up there, and the buses are empty. So people are not calling my office asking for more public transportation. They're calling my office saying, when are my roads going to be slurry sealed? I need a stop sign at this particular location. So sometimes I get a little concerned when people get in the room and they say, well, public transportation is good, and we kind of have to force people to use it, and we want them to use less cars when that's not what they want. And so that's something that I think we need to take into consideration, because we're not, I mean, I have a daughter that lives in New York, and she uses public transportation. She loves it.
Yeah.
In fact, when she comes out here, I don't want her driving my car, because I'm not sure she could drive a car. So I just get I want us to be careful about telling people what they are supposed to do instead of letting them drive it. It's like cars. People have decided that we want people to drive electric cars, and then we come up with tax incentives and try to get people. But the best-selling car in the country is the Ford F-150 pickup truck, the monster trucks. That's what they want. So I just want to get your reaction to that.
Councilmember, I totally agree. There isn't a one-size-fits-all solution. And I also think we've seen light rail fail in places that aren't dense enough to support it, right? And so that's a cautionary tale. Like, it should only really go, I think, where the zoning is in place, the planning in place, and the desire is in place for people to live that kind of life. I will tell you, so my wife's family is from Charlotte, North Carolina, and I've spent the last 15 years going back and forth to Charlotte, and I've seen Charlotte convert from a completely auto-oriented town to a place where the light rail is very popular. They passed referenda to extend the light rail, and people are living in apartments. But that's not all of Charlotte, and it shouldn't be all of Vegas, right? But I think, though, that when you talk about the Ford F-150, here's the dilemma, and that's what some of the early slides are. I'm not here to tell people what they should do, but basic capitalism tells you that, so if a factory pollutes a river, the factory has to pay to clean up the river, because that's part of the cost of doing business for that factory. So take SUVs or minivans. In the 90s, we declared light trucks to be cars, because it was a huge boon to the American automotive industry, but it wasn't very good policy. And if people want that, God bless, but just like the factory that's creating problems for everyone, right, the hard pill to swallow is to say, and this is the point of gas taxes, if you looked at the amount of pollution, congestion, et cetera, with gas taxes should actually, in this country, like most of the industrialized world, be much higher. It's not saying people shouldn't choose to drive. It's saying that there is a cost to your behavior, right? And that's not socialism. That's actually capitalism. It's basic Adam Smith 101, that when your behavior induces societal costs, you have to pay into those costs. And I know everyone doesn't want to hear that, but this is why that's the point of the slide of the Federal Highway Act. We built billions of dollars of highways with taxpayer money, and no one seems to think that's a subsidy. And that induced people to want the lifestyle that you're talking about. But there's a huge cost to that. And so like in New York today, just like in London and Stockholm, we are probably on the verge of passing congestion pricing, which says that if someone wants to drive into New York, they can choose to do it, but they're going to have to pay a pretty hefty toll to drive into New York because of all the negative problems that driving causes.
So, Councilman Anthony, great question, complicated to answer.
Complicated.
And I was also reminded the other day that had Henry Ford reached out to his customers before the Model T and asked them what they wanted, their response clearly would have been a faster horse. So somewhere between the two, right? Councilman Coughlin, I think.
Thank you very much, Pranam. I don't want to take away from the idea of transportation and the needs and the fragmentation of it. I'm very, very worried about retail fragmentation. It is happening at light speed, and it is happening, I bet you it's happening in Ulaanbaatar. It's happening in Berlin. That retail is being savaged by people who choose to shop electronically. And so that in the end, what happens if we don't have retail local, but rather our retail is computer connected to a fulfillment center with vast numbers of huge warehouses around the country to supply us with our product. And there won't be any more window shopping. There won't be any more malls, interior or exterior.
Yeah.
What do you see? Because that's coming faster than the need for light rail.
It's a great question. And I actually have a lot of optimism about it, because this is why. Because the narrative of retail goes like this. There were mom and pop shops, and then big box stores came along and malls came along and killed almost every major downtown in America. And Main Street was decimated by shopping malls. And now what's happening is Amazon is decimating the big box stores, right? But I think that creates an enormous opportunity for a resurgence of unique mom and pop experience-based retail that is less about, I think that the idea that you're going to buy a USB cable from a Best Buy is virtually done, right? And those stores are in real trouble. I agree. But the idea that you can create unique experiences with retail where people are providing something that you just can't get on Amazon, right? It's a one-off, whether it's food or something that's handmade or a leather good that you're not going to find it on the internet. And those spaces are clustered together. I think that kind of retail has an opportunity now to have a huge resurgence, because what's happened is the rental rates are dropping for retail shops around the country, and it means that young, sort of more independent retailers might have a fighting chance against a big credit tenant like a big box store for that same space. And so I'm hopeful about that. I think that actually that could create some really unique experiences, but we're going to go through a very tough period with this. The other thing I would just say, and that's part of why the example was there of that project in Harlem, ground floor can be activated by more than just retail. You can have artist space, you can have small office space and small commercial space. There's a lot that can activate the ground floor of our city beyond just shopping, and I think that's where we have to get creative.
Well, I got to say this about the rent aspect, if I could just follow up. That, if that was really true, maybe rents in New York are dropping. I don't see them dropping here, and of course, we're an unusual environment. But still, I don't see anybody taking the lead saying, here's how we should design our roads to meet maybe the no retail. If you take a road, you put it this way, you plan it this way, and all of a sudden the reason is gone because there was going to be a cluster of retail surrounded by housing. What are we left with? So, I mean, the congressional action, by the way, is horrible. They're still letting it fly tax-free across the country and so on and so forth. So the means of paying for the infrastructure and the means of paying for making it comfortable for those mom and pop and unique kind of stores you talk about, the means of paying for all of that.
Yeah, there should be a level. There has to be a level playing field, right?
Yeah. So I'm telling you, it's cause for real worry.
Any other questions?
So as I watched your presentation, and this is my first retreat with the city, and I'm a new city councilwoman, but Ward 6 is our most rural ward, and I personally drive an F-250, so it's a big diesel truck that I
You're
schlep.
from Brooklyn.
I am from Brooklyn, Bensonhurst, and I schlep my horses and ATVs and all my guns anywhere I want to go. Okay, so
Got it.
it's a lifestyle, right? It's a lifestyle.
Yeah.
And so folks, now as being born and raised in Brooklyn, New York, my roots are a city girl. But I choose to get my grandkids on horses twice a week and shoot guns and teach them all that out where we live in Ward 6, which is rural. So this, and Las Vegas is so unique. Las Vegas is so unique. It's just not like a cookie cutter, we can put this in a box type of a city. So as I'm looking at this retreat today and as we go forth, some of my folks in the West are definitely not going to let the city folks' ideals of condension and really being on top of one another work for my ward. So I love your presentation. I love how we convert old factories into beautiful spaces, and I love to visit that in Brooklyn. But I live in Ward 6 with my big trucks and horses, and that ain't going to change. So I've got to make sure that we adapt for my ward, our growth, right, to our folks' liking.
So, Councilmember, this is where I'm going to tell you where we absolutely agree. The more you let sprawl happen in Ward 6, the less land there's going to be for your horseback riding. right?
No, I disagree. Simply because here in the state of Nevada, the BLM owns 89% of our land. So I travel to D.C. on a monthly basis and work with our federal delegation to get that land back. And land is not cheap, so it's not like we can all go out and buy an acre or two. I mean, right now, you can't buy a half acre for less than $500,000. So it's all economic. So no, we're not running out of land. The federal government just has to stop stealing it from us.
But case in point, what I'm saying is, if that land were completely unprotected, because what we've seen around virtually every major city in America is, especially right, in the 2000s when you had the ownership society and subprime mortgages, is you saw massive subdivision growth, right? Subdivisions that were 2 hours outside of a city center. And, here's the thing. If you love my basic point is, if you love nature, right, the last thing you want to do is see it chewed up by more and more subdivision. So the thing is, I think there is potential common cause between the people who want to live the more dense city life in the center of town and the people with the F-250s and the ATVs, because they actually have a certain commonality in mind. You want those people who are living in the center of town to have great lives in the center of town, so they're not invading your space. Right? And that's, I actually think, where you've got really aligned goals.
So we actually do. So out in Ward 6, the city has a huge vision plan that we passed of 1,120 acres, multi-use. That's literally incorporating horses, bikes, shops, and everything around. But out in the west, as the councilwoman, we will keep it rural.
Yeah, God bless. I'm all for that. Believe me, I'm not saying that's the point of the Texas slide. The point of the Texas slide is that what I was saying is, like, at 30 units per acre, if everyone can live in Texas, that means the rest of the world is natural, right? And now, obviously, that's just an abstract thought, but the point is just, if we really love nature, we should be building less into it and keep rural areas rural.
Right. We have to be quite cautious, because that sounds fabulous, what you're saying, right? Until the federal government says, we're going to keep this rural, but now you can't bring your horses because all of a sudden the manure kills the turtles. Do you understand what I'm saying? So we just have to be quite cautious. Yeah, okay.
I don't do manure and turtles. That's way beyond my pay grade.
Show off. We've got time for one more question. Councilwoman Tarkis. You got the last word.
This is sort of in a different basis, but right now we are looking into using form-based planning. And I wanted to know your thoughts on it. I understand what Michelle is saying, because, and we do have sort of different attitudes. I live both on the East Coast and the West Coast, and there are different attitudes out here. It's more expansive and all of that. But now that we're finding the two sort of going, banging against each other, and we want to do the right thing, and my understanding, we're still studying this, but my understanding from form-based planning is we would have more intense areas, and then they would go into less intense building, and then eventually out to the rural area.
Right.
And I just wanted your thoughts on that, because we haven't moved into it yet, but we're considering doing it very soon.
Yeah, no, great. To me, the devil's in the details, and I think what you just outlined sounds right, and I think it's very consistent with the conversation we've had this morning. My problem with form-based planning is it tends to be quite prescriptive in terms of what you can build and what it should look like and all of that, and that gets back to, and why I was showing Mongolia, is, it goes back to what I was saying. I think every place is unique and so in some form-based code, they're real, like everyone has to have a front porch because and I find that stuff to be way too restrictive and, not responsive to place, right? And, I would, if you are going to adopt a form-based code, I would just really suggest that code be very, very tailored to what you need and want in Las Vegas, not what some planner from the East Coast says a good city should look like. So that I think that's to me the sort of quibble with it. I think the larger urban geography ideas are probably pretty much right in terms of what you just described, but just I don't like this idea that every city is supposed to look a certain way.
Right, well, wouldn't, according to what I understand, the citizens or the residents of the area would make the determination as to height and things like that? I'm asking the question, we have a medical district that we think is going to be absolutely great, and people are coming in and wanting to build larger buildings there, but adjacent to that is a place where the mayor herself lives, where, you have more of a rural feeling. It isn't rural, but it's...
It was.
It was rural. In fact, we have places right next to it that you can have horses. Right next to the district, that you can still have horses if you want to. And so we're having a little bit of a clash there, the concern of a high bill. And that was, I just don't know how to figure that one out, so we can sort of do it both ways.
Yeah, and I don't feel like I know enough about it to give you a reasoned response. But what I will say, sometimes every city is going through these collisions in a different way. I mean,
Right.
in New York, it's less about horses, but we have our share of these issues as well. And I would argue that some amount of that friction isn't so bad. I mean, cities have a certain amount of social friction in them, and we all have to learn to live with each other, and we all have sort of some disagreements about maybe how we want to live, and some of that isn't always so bad. I worry about really prescriptive solutions to problems. I think every problem is very
I
unique.
understand that,
Yeah.
and I agree with you. I just wanted to say lastly that I really appreciated what you said today, your presentation. I learned a lot from it, and I want to thank you very much.
Thank you, Greg.
If I
We
could-
are at time,
I'm
but
just going to say, maybe his definition of form-based code might be different than what we're
might be,
thinking. And maybe it's not
It might
the
be.
same. So
Well-
if you could connect with our planners later.
say that again?
Well, all we're going to hear here is prescriptive, too prescriptive.
No, as long as it's
It
locally
could be-
based, that's
but it
all
could
I'm
be
Locally
that
based.
What his
Yeah, as
idea
long as it's
is
locally based.
different than what our planners have
Yeah,
been
what I'm
thinking.
hearing is devil is in the details.
Right.
It is a very specific and unique and personal set of responses, and tension in community to get to those responses is what we should expect.
Right.
And Poonam, that's what our
You had the last
specialists
word.
have told us. They've told us we have the people who live there and who are going to be involved, so it won't be so prescriptive. Sorry.
No, that's fine. I just wanted to thank you because I know we will be in touch and really get the advice for you as we run into the difficulties that we have. We get our smaller areas, a city that was 70,000, 5,000, depending upon who came here when. We came here in '64, less than 100,000, living in a rural area that got swallowed up, and everything keeps getting swallowed up, and I think that's what Councilwoman was speaking to, those people that choose to live there. But the one question, and after thanking you, which should have been my end, having grown up in the heart of Manhattan, not blocks away from the 3rd Avenue L, knowing that history is cyclical, that works now and then it repeats and it falls, and we are now in a technological age which is going to continue to have the problems and growth of what Councilman Coffin had mentioned. I mean, there are so many issues we're dealing with. The pollution and degradation of everything on 3rd Avenue, a really unsafe area for the most part, but dirty with that L, which is an overground subway, actually. And now it's 3rd Avenue over the past 40 years is probably one of the most attractive once that L was pulled down. All your light rail to which you're referring or other types of multimodal transportation, is there an advantage for it to be ground level always so that doesn't recur? We have one incident on one of our streets where we have a monorail. It has changed the entire block under it. So your
You have
suggestions
pretty
in that.
wide streets. I think you can do them at grade. I'm not a big fan of the stuff up in the air. It tends to be not so great. But thank you very much for having me. I
Thank
really
you.
enjoyed
We
it.
just hope you'll stay in touch with us.
Yes,
So-
absolutely.
Thank you for being here. That was exactly great food for thought. You've moved my kaleidoscope around a lot. Express thanks and express
you.
thanks for your time. And then, based on your strategy to get out of New York when it's really cold, we'll see you next year about this time. Got it. Safe drive to Phoenix. Next up, so you're welcome, because there was some conversation about whether we needed a walk-on song, whether we needed to have confetti cannons. And fortunately, we avoided all of that and just said, no, Scott, you'll just step up and start talking. So here's your city manager, without confetti cannons, without a walk-on song, Scott F.
So I've got about an hour, and I'm going to cover a lot of territory. And it's deliberate because we really wanted you to see what we've been doing in past prioritization and planning, what our progress has been in achieving those priorities, what the results have been of the last two sessions leading up to today, the director's session and the stakeholder session, and then wanted to give you a snapshot of what our citizens are telling us they think our priorities should be. We have the very preliminary results of our latest citizen survey, which we'll be presenting to you later at a council meeting, but you'll get a chance to look back at what they said last year and what they said most recently. So I think as Poonam had said earlier, the question driving today is what should the city of Las Vegas prioritize in its strategic plan for the next 3 to 5 years. Successful organizations are always strategically planning. They're always looking at their current situation, they're looking back, and they're looking forward to strategically move the organization with the situation and what they think the situation will be down the road. So today is part of a many-step process. I think we mentioned to you on December 11, our leadership team of a staff of deputy directors, managers, directors, all met, established a set of priorities. We moved on to, on January 18th, a large list of stakeholders, a very large group that represented a very broad cross-section of the community that evaluated that work, established their own set of priorities. On top of that, and that brings us up to today, where you'll take that information and set your own set of priorities. Once you've done this, then we'll take that, write a comprehensive city-wide strategic plan around it. We hope to bring that to you in March, and then comes the job of pushing those priorities into our Results Vegas program and all the department's strategic business plans. That's the important step of making sure that all the administration of the city starts to carry out those priorities in everything we do. So in the past, back in 2014, you had a similar session to this. We did it in 2 steps where you set priorities. Coming out of that, we've done a lot of planning over the last several years. We did what we called City by Design, and it was a framework of a number of plans. It was a mobility plan, it was a downtown master plan, it was a medical district plan, there was education work, there was work on homelessness and public safety, all under the umbrella of what we call City by Design. Parallel to that, we've been morphing our city's internal performance management system to be more robust and more transparent. We call that Results Vegas. Back in 2014, you set 4 strategic priorities: economic diversification, education, public safety with an emphasis on homelessness, and transportation and mobility. The City by Design framework, I touched on that briefly, really focused on 3 themes: a connected, vibrant city, economic prosperity, and leadership in partnerships. And we took all that planning work and clustered that into those 3 thematic areas. And as a city, as you know, we have embraced performance measurement. I would say we're on the leading edge of performance measurement and transparency in terms of open data nationally. If you go to resultsvegas.lasvegas.gov, you'll go to a series of dashboards that measure all the work that our departments are doing and moving the city forward, a large portion of which focus on city council priorities. There are actually a total of 18 dashboards on this site that provide a great transparency of information to our public.
Excuse me. I hate to interrupt.
Sure.
Can you go back that slide,
Sure.
please? We have just gotten the rankings. We're number 51 out of 51 educational components of this country. How is that possible? What are we talking about? 86.8 high school graduation. What does the data tell? What is the honesty of the data we're having here?
And if I just...
And we have no control over the Clark County School District for certain. So I know that question. What does this data tell us? What does this mean to us, please?
I would either refer to Tori or maybe, as Lisa's here, maybe they can comment on what that indicator expressly provides. The high school graduation.
And I see Dr. Hibbler, too.
I think what we're questioning is that this percentage of high school graduates would probably not place us last in the country.
Correct.
Good morning. Lisa Morris-Hibbler, Director of Youth Development and Social Innovation, for the record. The number, the graduation rate comes from the school district and the state. There are a number of ways that graduation rate is calculated, including some of the changes that were made for retro diplomas and a number of different things. What you're seeing when you talk about us being 51 in the nation, that is based on a number of other indicators, such as our school proficiency rates, our students, where they are. So it's pretty complicated. What I can say is some of the other indicators that we look at in terms of the high school graduation rates are our kids college and career ready, which is based on like our ACT scores, which definitely shows that we still need improvement. But the graduation rate and how it's calculated is very complicated, so we just use the number that they have.
And I don't mean to interrupt your time, because it's much more important what you're saying. Data you can do anything you want it to do. So knowing we, the city, have no control of the Clark County School District whatsoever, but this is a very critical point, why we focused on education as one of our 4 priorities. I just wanted to be clear and to hear from you that this is just a data output from the Clark County School District, isn't talking necessarily about the city of Las Vegas.
That is correct, Mayor, and that's why we look at a lot of other indicators to really show how well our students are faring in education.
In addition to everything Dr. Hibbler just said,
Mayor,
bear in mind that this is data calculated based on a methodology that calculates across Clark County School District the graduation rates. This refers to the 8 high schools that are located within the city of Las Vegas. The targeted ones.
Okay.
So that's what. So it is a subset. So can we get back? I don't want to go too deep on this one.
I would just like to say what she said, which is that they've changed the method by which they're using the data. I believe that Lisa said that, and that's the key why we're higher now than we were before. And if the data collection changes, I think they should let us know. And they did.
Can we commit complete clarity in that response as a follow-up?
Yep.
Good. Okay.
So we've also, what I'm going to do is very quickly go through just an overview of some of the things we've been doing over the last 4 years in each of these 4 priority areas. In the area of economic diversification, as you know, the economy is now becoming more robust. We've created a lot of jobs over the last several years. Big piece, a centerpiece of our economic development strategy has been to get the UNLV School of Medicine up and running. Major driver of economic diversification. Increase occupancy in retail, commercial, and industrial space. We've recruited major employers. I've listed a number of major employers there. We've been very engaged in a new program, a new market tax credits, which has allowed us to go forward with a number of major projects, in particular economically distressed census tracts within the city. We've been very engaged in technology businesses downtown, especially in the Innovation District. We have embraced autonomous vehicles and systems as a state, as a region, and as a city. So there's a number of things we're doing on that front. And we've spent a lot of time building and rebuilding the organizational infrastructure around economic development. There's been a dramatic transformation of our regional economic development group, our state economic development program, and even within our own economic and urban development department, which, by the way, was recently recognized as an accredited economic development organization. So we've really pushed hard in the area of economic diversification. In the area of education, we went all in as a city. We created a Department of Youth Development and Social Innovation, and it really exists to complement, support through a wide range of things what the Clark County School District does, falling short of actually getting in the space of education. We are involved, we continue to stay involved in Batteries Included. We've renovated and opened 2 new Strong Start Academies, adding 372 preschool beds in pathways to underperforming schools, and we're planning to build more. We've launched 9 Reinvent Schools, where we created a community and school program, provide a wide range of services and support to kids in underperforming schools. We've been involved with the U.S. Conference of Mayors and the American Beverage Foundation for Healthy America, and we have a Safe Key program that is more than just a program to watch kids in before and after school. It's a program with a very robust educational component to it. And then very recently created the Mayor's Fund for Las Vegas Life, which is, the goal is to start to tap into private and corporate support to help fund some of the things that we're doing that support the Clark County School District. In the area of public safety, if you remember going back to that retreat, the focus was on more cops. So let me just point out a few things here that has happened since that time. Let me make a point that 2/3 of our general fund budget is dedicated to public safety. And we have been stepping up and supporting Metro so that they can maintain their goal of 2.0 officers per 1,000 residents. The More Cops tax was approved by the Clark County Commission, and so that created an augmentation of support to Metro. The legislature approved the Crime Prevention Act of 16, which added a sales tax that added police officers in the resort corridor and throughout Clark County. And then in your budget for this fiscal year, we added 14 city marshals as part of a program to add more marshals over the next several years. So as a city, as part of a regional partnership, we've stepped up in the area of public safety. We maintain our commitment to public safety. But we also said homelessness is a big part of that. Homelessness, not just downtown, but in the neighborhoods as it's increasing, is a very big part of our citizens' perception of public safety. So we've stepped up the game on providing support and getting people off the street by providing enhanced services, and we've got some numbers there about the number of persons that we've been serving that are homeless. We presented back in May a robust plan to build a courtyard in the Corridor of Hope to serve as a day center that would facilitate getting homeless individuals off the streets. And we've been part of a partnership with Metro and a number of other service providers to provide interdisciplinary outreach teams to reach out to homeless on the street and convince them to either go into the courtyard or seek the services that they need to get out of the cycle that is contributing to their homelessness as they experience it day in and day out. And another piece is we are now doing monthly counts of street homelessness so we can understand whether we're actually impacting street homelessness. Instead of just that annual count that we have historically done, we're starting to do it on a recurring basis to know whether the things that we're doing are actually making an impact. In the area of transportation mobility, you know, it's interesting. I just drove in this morning, and you can't get away from Project Neon. It's right in front of you, and it's moving very quickly. But it will dramatically impact the city of Las Vegas in particular as it interfaces with downtown Las Vegas. You approved a mobility master plan in May of 16. The fuel revenue indexing funds that were approved by our citizens will greatly augment ours and the region's ability to add more transportation projects and proceed with more improvements. We've worked on traffic capacity and safety improvements along Summerlin Parkway. We are working with the RTC, and there was legislative approval of a potential 2020 ballot measure to raise additional funds dedicated to transit improvements such as light rail. And we've just launched a downtown circulator that is already serving a high level of ridership in terms of moving people around in the downtown area. If you remember, that was a key component of our mobility plan. And we have the first fully autonomous shuttle in the United States in downtown Las Vegas running in the Fremont East area. And 85% of our residents have a bike lane or off-street bike trail within a quarter mile of their home. So we've done a lot of work in the area of mobility and transportation. So that's how we've come from the 4 priorities you set back in 2014. Now, looking forward, in the Directors Managers Retreat in 17, back in December of this past year, we identified 4 thematic areas that were clusters for the potential of new priorities going forward. The first is iconic Las Vegas, where we were all about creating iconic spaces for residents, visitors, and businesses. The second is workforce development, to prepare our workforce for the future, and I'll get into these in a little bit more detail as I go on. Third is Smart Vegas, where we become the city of choice nationally and globally to develop smart city applications. And then finally, dealing with at-risk populations, developing strategic partnerships to address critical issues among at-risk populations. So again, to go into each one of these individually. So what we've got here is a matrix. It shows on the left-hand side the things that came up in the Directors Retreat, and on the right-hand side a reaction by our stakeholders to all of those initiatives in terms of the things they thought were the most important of those that we teed up, and in some cases there might even be some new things. In the area of iconic Las Vegas, we had a number of things: incentivizing private investment to increase housing options and business development, creating iconic public spaces for residents, including public arts, sports, recreation, and green space, and accelerate construction of downtown, the medical district, and citywide infrastructure and streetscape amenities to attract development. Those are the 3 highest priorities. A lesser priority was increase arts education awareness and increase public art within the city. And then, while the directors said develop events facilities, which included tourism, convention, meetings, and event space, that didn't register with the stakeholders. Moving on to workforce development, and this is a broad category to encompass a wide range of things dealing with workforce development and education. Number 1 on the list was promote higher education or technology-based programs for business attraction, 51%. Second was support the continuum of education from pre-K through workforce development. That was 34%. And the next was support efforts to increase technical and vocational training at 10%, and then increase the presence of higher education facilities within the city at 5%. And then 2 that directors teed up: business parks and employment centers, hire, train, and retain a smart, flexible, and adaptable city workforce, which was fairly an internal goal. Neither of those registered with the stakeholders. The next one was Smart Vegas, and again, this is another one of those umbrella categories that covered a number of topical things. The number 1 thing on that list was to increase public-private partnerships to develop a smart city. The second was invest in smart city applications for operational efficiencies and private investment opportunities at 27%. The third was to embrace opportunities for financial and environmental sustainability at 22%. And then there were 3 more there: expand innovative technology and connectivity to residents and underserved areas, implement virtual governance for public engagement and service delivery, and modernize state laws, regulations, and internal process to increase efficiency. While those were director, staff priorities, they didn't register with our stakeholders. And then finally, in the area of at-risk populations, the number 1 priority there was really kind of combined from a priority that was set by stakeholders to provide opportunities for the expansion of affordable housing and healthcare services at 45%. Number 2 was address homelessness downtown at 43%. Resonated on both sides. And then a third, which was again, as I said, a new priority that came out of the stakeholders that didn't get teed up by the directors, was at-risk youth at 12%. And then there were 3 that were teed up by staff: create and improve health care services, mental health and substance abuse services for at-risk populations, provide revitalization and programming in strategic neighborhoods, provide opportunities for the expansion of affordable housing. They didn't register with the stakeholders. So this gives you that snapshot of what your administrative team thinks, what the stakeholders thought of that, what they added to it, and gives you some relative strength and differences. Now I want to talk to you a little bit about our community survey. As you know, as a city, we've used a group that completes a community survey that asks our citizens how we're doing as a city, what our priorities should be, and what we should emphasize. That survey is a demographic profile of our residents. There were 934 respondents. There were at least 150 per ward. It was gender balanced. It was age representative of the cross-section of our community, and it was representative of race and ethnicity in our community. Now, there was a situation where certain persons chose to call themselves more than one of those racial and ethnic categories, so you'll see the total be more than 100%, because they might have designated themselves as white, Hispanic, or a mix of the 2 categories. But the point of it is, it's very, very representative and balanced in terms of a snapshot of our community. Now, as I said earlier, we'll be presenting this to you at a later council meeting. And what we're presenting are the results of the 16 survey and the preliminary results of the 17th survey as we just obtained them, just so you can understand what the citizens said our priority should be. So, in the area of major city services, the 3 key issues that should receive the most emphasis from city leaders over the next 2 years were maintenance of city streets, economic development and jobs, and metropolitan police services. And you can see in the blue, we're looking at what our citizens said in 16, and in the red, what our citizens are telling us in 17. In the next area of maintenance services, the top 3 issues that should receive the most emphasis from city leaders over the next 2 years were the overall cleanliness of the city, streets, and other public areas is number 1, adequacy of street lighting, and then we had a category that straddled the 2 surveys that really dealt with the maintenance of streets and traffic signals and street signage. In other words, maintenance of streets and street regulation appurtenances were the highest priorities. Public safety. Number 1, the city's efforts to prevent crime. Number 2, the visibility of police in neighborhoods. And then number 3, how quickly police respond to emergencies. Those were the 3 key priority areas in the area of public safety. And in community development, We had enforcing cleanup and removal of junk and debris on private property. Second was graffiti removal. And then we had another one that was split over the two surveys of neighborhood cleanups sponsored by the city and enforcing exterior maintenance of residential property. All three of those ranking very high with our citizens. In the areas of parks, recreation, cultural community, and youth development services, three high priorities. One, universal, both 16 and 17 homeless services. Number two was senior citizen programs and centers. And number three, walking and biking trails in the city. Now, pardon me?
Where was youth development?
Well,
did it show?
It was a category of questions, and these are the three things that bubbled to the top. Those are the three things that our citizens said, out of all the things we asked, and as I said, we'll be getting either more detailed results later, but these are the three things they said are the most important. In the areas with the lowest satisfaction levels, now I'm going at the other end, you got one end where the citizens are telling you what are the highest priorities, the things we should work on. These are the areas where there were the lowest percentage of excellent or good or satisfied or very satisfied. So this would imply we need to work harder on these things. As a place to raise children, and if you remember we've talked about this in past presentations, I think there's been a sense that there's a perception about Las Vegas as a place to raise children. Second, the overall quality of public schools in the city was number two. And then again, back up on the list, an area that while it was a high priority we needed to work on it previously, it's one where our citizens think we're not doing a good enough job on, and that's homeless services. So homelessness made both sides. One that's a high priority and one where we need to work harder on. So with that progress of strategic planning that we've done, the results we've achieved in accomplishing our priorities, and then kind of setting the stage for today, the areas, the clusters that our administrative team and the stakeholders are telling us are things we need to be looking at, as well as our citizens.
Excellent report. Thank you, Scott. Poonam, are we going to get to a point where our stakeholders and our guests that are here are going to be able to ask questions too?
We had not. Your time and your decision-making is the thing that's the most important. I think, how many of your stakeholders in the audience this morning? That takes care of it. We had said to stakeholders, they saw how their input was reflected back to them, and then we did say, if you have another half a day that you'd like to just gut your life and be a part of this, feel free to come.
And so many, though, however, that are here, I know, have business or are part of the master plan community. So as this report was given, which I think is really informative, and I'm delighted you compared it to last year, the information here I think is very valuable, and that we seem to be driving in the right direction. So I just didn't know if everybody that's here was going to not. Okay.
We had not contemplated that because it didn't seem like best and highest use of this limited time.
Thank you.
Any questions for Scott? Councilman Copeland.
Thank you very much. Scott, we all live in our 6 different little kingdoms or fiefdoms here in the city, and you said these were balanced or seeded with about 150 respondents in each ward. But because we're kind of a tale of two cities, which I think our visitor from New York discovered this morning, that we've got the new west and the older central east. What about looking at how those vary from west to east? The responses. It's nice to know a little bit about, if you wanted to blend them together, it's less oversimplification of what you've just presented. Could we see the results, somewhere? Well, you break it down by ward, but then you also kind of blend east together and west together to see the concerns and to see the suggestions.
That's something that we probably can get. We don't have it available for today, I don't believe, but it would be presented when we bring it to a council where you could start to understand those dynamics. I think the intent today was really just to give you the snapshot in those areas, those key areas that tie to prioritization, what our citizens said are the three most important things in each of those areas, so that you would understand, so you really have in front of you the three groups, your administrative team, a cross-section of stakeholders, sort of like a focus group, and then a survey of our citizens. So you have a lot of information about what a broad cross-section of the community thinks priority should be.
So, and I guess we're looking at a pool of people that are not shy, that they spoke their minds.
Oh, yeah.
That's the main thing.
The stakeholder meeting, I think we had 75 to 100 or so there. It was a very vibrant process.
Okay, you're laughing, so that must have been fun. Thanks.
So I have a question. So again, so I'm under the impression, as this is my first retreat, of what you guys have put forth in the past to see if the council and their wards want to go forth with what your priorities and what the previous priorities were or not. Because as I enjoy what you've done, the transportation and the mobility isn't really an issue up in the Northwest, and I'll let councilmen up in the Northwest of me speak as well. So I think, because I don't think we're going to be here long, maybe till 1 or 2, but I think that sitting on this council, I couldn't say, hey, yay, I'm on board, I want to go with this fourth, because in my ward there's a lot that's different. And so this particular plan doesn't totally fit the desires of what I would wish to do with my ward moving forth.
So let me acknowledge that, and acknowledge that if we're doing it right, that should be true for all of you. In other words, this is not a strategic plan for a ward. This is a strategic plan for a community. And so it is going to require that you toggle between what you believe to be true for those who you directly serve and are elected by, and toggle up to, I am also a leader of the community. And so this is not a strategic plan for a ward. And so yes, you'll get the deeper dive detail on the resident survey per ward, but this exercise today is about getting to clarity for the whole. Does that make sense?
Yes, but that's not what I thought, but that's fine.
Okay, I might add in that I think what's come out of this is a great suggestion as we go forward. We're looking globally at the whole and what we're going to be doing strategically here. But I think what comes out of this is a need for a survey in each ward to get their priorities in a similar manner as what we've done here. So perhaps that can be on the plan going forward, because obviously as it changes, and we know, for instance, homelessness now, because of the work on Project Neon, we continue to see a huge amount of homelessness in the downtown area, but it's spreading all over the place because of Project Neon and road closures and everything else. So I think in the future, and perhaps in working with the different council persons in the ward, that we look strategically at that. But this is about the whole today.
So I just clarified, the resident survey has been going on in the very recent past. And so we accelerated to get to this level of data able to be presented today.
No, it's excellent.
So what is coming, just not ready today,
Oh, good.
are the crosstabs that will give you same answers to all of these questions just based on respondents in your
Excellent.
ward.
By ward.
So
I
that
was
is coming.
just going to say that.
That is
So
coming.
then this was, we just kind of culled out the priorities
The top line.
just to give you that for today as part of your deliberation. But those details are coming later.
Okay, well, I mean, if I just might add, because I think each council person would be very interested in that piece.
Absolutely.
But today is, and being elected at large, my view is the whole city, inclusive of all.
correct.
And that's what we're sort of looking at.
That's exactly what we're looking at. It is a strategic plan for the city of Las Vegas, not for one of,
Yeah,
For
and
what?
I should make a comment or two. There is a basic level of service we provide as a city that continues, that it reflects your priorities as expressed through the budget and other processes. So we continue to maintain streets, we continue to build things, we continue to support public safety through our functions as well as metros and so forth. Those continue. That doesn't change. It's really about what are those top-level things that we really want to focus on above and beyond basic levels of services as a city to accomplish over the next 3 to 5 years.
that's exactly right. Okay, so I want to just play a little word game. At the top of the agenda, it says City of Las Vegas Council Retreat. I want you to cross out the word retreat and just write in the word advance. So we have just looked backwards. We've just understood from where we advance. You are not a council that's going to retreat. You're a council that's going to advance, right? So I'm going to come back to you, Councilman Stavro. Anthony, we missed you at the beginning, so I'm going to put you on the spot. One of the questions that we asked everybody was one adjective, one word, to describe what you hope will be the adjective that fits the city of Las Vegas 5 years from now. And just to help you, I'll tell you what, these are awesome words. We heard growth, we heard action, we heard steady, we heard vibrant, we heard loftier. What would your adjective be? And you can't say donut, because that would not reflect well.
Okay, I kind of forget what an adjective is.
It's a describing word. A describing word.
Just kidding. I
Yeah.
got that. Highest quality.
Highest
I'll just
quality.
give you 2 words.
I
Highest
love
quality.
those hyphenated one words. That's great. Highest quality. Beautiful. Thank you. So that's where we're advancing to, right? Future. So this is 3 to 5 years. The driving question should be, what should the city of Las Vegas prioritize in its strategic plan for the coming 3 to 5 years? Here's where we begin. And we've simply done our best, because there is no perfection. So put any expectation of perfection away. Today we are striving for good enough, right? And what would be immensely helpful, that is only something that you can do, is to create clarity around what are the key themes, the starting point that we're going to offer you based on first base and second base and third base. First base, discussion with managers and directors. Second base, discussion with stakeholders. Third base, input from your residents. Altogether, that's over 1,000 people. So what that process has yielded is a suggestion for you to begin with that gives you 4 themes. So a place to start is to say, for the next 3 to 5 years, if we strategically advanced iconic Las Vegas, workforce development, smart Vegas, at-risk populations, we would be a little bit closer to having growth, action, steady, loftier, vibrant, and highest quality be ascribed to us. Does that make sense? So we're going to start there. So here's the steps that we're going to take. And it's going to be a little awkward, and that's good, because there's nothing precise or right or wrong answer about this work, right? It's about getting to clarity. That's what we're going to move to. So we've carved out sort of 5 steps. First step, let's look at the themes. Have you all consider the themes, affirm the themes, modify the themes, discuss the themes. Ultimately, after about 15 minutes, we're going to have to decide the theme. So here's the first tool I'm going to give you. It's the use of your thumb. This means I'm good. Let's keep going. This means I'm ambivalent. It doesn't really matter to me one way or another. And this means not working for me. So if, as we go along the process, I may just say, let's just inventory our thumbs. Right? There's no such thing as perfection. We're striving for good enough. So that's one tool. The second tool is you've got some dots in front of you. And when we get to the next phase, first we agree on our themes. Then, within each themes, there are priorities that are presented to you as a place to start. So again, you see the priorities that are presented. You see what stakeholders opined about them. You've got some data from your residents that you can incorporate in that consideration. Ultimately, we want to look at the priorities underneath each theme and have you edit, modify, affirm all or some of the priorities. And then eventually, we're going to have you put your own personal prioritization to that list. That was a lot. It may not make sense. Can we just start the first step? Ready, set, go. Okay. There are the 4 themes up there. So, and you can see what each of them represents. Iconic Las Vegas, creating iconic spaces for residents, visitors, and businesses. That would be a strategic pillar. The suggestion is here. It would be one of the 4 strategic pillars that would guide everything at the City of Las Vegas, or most things at the City of Las Vegas, for the next 3 to 5 years. Second theme would be workforce development. We would become differently energetic and strategic and tactical in workforce development so that we would be preparing our workforce for the future. Is that feel to you like an appropriate second pillar? Third pillar, place to start, Smart Vegas. In the next 3 to 5 years, we'll be differently vigorous in becoming a city of choice to develop smart city applications. And finally, at-risk populations. For the next 3 to 5 years, the City of Las Vegas would be differently vigorous in developing strategic partnerships to address critical issues among at-risk populations. So you can get to your own clarity in whatever way you want. The desire is to get to clarity, right? And the question again, the driving question is, what are the strategic themes that the City of Las Vegas should strategically focus on for the next 3 to 5 years?
I mean, I'm good with all these themes up here, but they don't really cover what is my, I don't know the difference between a theme and priority from what you're talking about,
Okay.
but the theme or the priority that's most important to me isn't necessarily reflected what's on that screen.
So
I don't know if we need another theme or we're talking about priorities later on. So
We are gonna
you
talk
kind of
about
tell me
priorities.
when I need to bring that up because that's not up there right now.
So if you look in the handout, and it's not paginated, is it, Scott?
Yes.
They are paginated? Oh, I printed, I'm going to pull out the one. Oh, there they are. I brought mine from home. So the one that Scott just went through, if you turn to pages, if you want to sort of jump ahead in order to answer this portion of it, go to page,
You can wait if you want. It's up to you.
well, no, because this
Okay.
is all sort of simultaneous input that is important for you to bear in mind simultaneously, right?
Well,
If you go to page 7,
Okay?
so the top line is the screen that you're looking at, which are the 4 themes that began with the directors. And then the second slide on the bottom of page 7 says, here are the priorities under that first theme. So the way that we're approaching it now is let's start macro picture, the themes, and then we will go within each theme into the given priorities,
so
right?
we're assuming that we're keeping the same themes.
No, that is your decision right now. We
Okay.
are presenting as a starting place.
I
Right?
just would say, what you're saying.
So, yeah, I guess what I'm getting to is I would like to add a theme or, when we get to that point where.
We are at that point.
We're at that point right now?
What theme would you like to see here?
Well, I tell you, you know, I mean, I was on Metro for 29 years. I've been on the city council for 8 years, and really the theme from my standpoint, when I deal with the residents of Las Vegas, the most important thing to them is their neighborhood. So it doesn't matter if you're in, you know, the older part of Las Vegas, the newer part of Las Vegas, the most important thing is where they live.
Yeah.
And where it's important because that's where their biggest investment is, that's where they're raising their kids, that's where they're walking their dogs, that's where we have our parks. And if you look at the survey results, I mean, 90% of the comments they're talking about are about their neighborhood. Public safety, graffiti, cops, shopping carts, homeless people in their neighborhood. It all revolves around their neighborhood, and we're not discussing that in any of those themes. Those are all fine, but that's what people call me all the time, whether I'm on the city council or at Metro. They're calling Metro and saying, hey, there's a problem in my neighborhood I need you to fix. And if you live in a master plan community or a gated community, you're fine, because you call your HOA and they'll fix it. But most people don't live in that environment, so they're calling the city to get rid of graffiti. They're calling the city to get rid of a house that's causing problems, and we don't have that as a theme. And I'll guarantee you, most of the people out in the audience, that's what they're dealing with at the city of Las Vegas, is what's going on. It's code enforcement, it's our marshals, it's our, hey, can you fix the street lights? And, I've seen the street lights out in my neighborhood. Streets need to be cleaned. So I think we need some kind of a theme that talks about neighborhood preservation, or neighborhood quality of life. Or
So see how responsive we are? As you are speaking, we are putting it in there.
Okay, who's doing that? Okay, thanks.
So now,
So
I want to give you a little bit of explanation.
That's what I want to throw out there.
So I want to give you some explanation, and I just offer it because, and
But
chime
can
in.
I
looked at these
just
guys.
ask a question here? Now, you'd have, that's at-risk population. What he's talking about in his ward, I have in my ward too. I mean, I believe in our Constitution that made up our city, one of the first things it says is public safety. The calls we're getting now are, I'm afraid, I had my purse stolen at such and such a place, but that's your ward, it's my ward.
No,
You probably have it in all.
I said that at the beginning. This is the entire city, because we all have neighborhoods.
So I want to offer a perspective.
And just one other comment is when people have these neighborhood issues, they're not calling their congressman, they're not calling their senator, they're not calling their state senate assembly. They're calling the city of Las Vegas, they're calling their city councilmen, they're calling their city liaisons, they're calling city employees, because that's who is supposed to take care of it.
So again, I want to offer a perspective, just to provide some information. That has been a big source of discussion. So let me first just affirm that the reason you don't see it up here as a specific theme is not because it is not a very critical priority. However, here are some of the perspectives that get offered. One, that is why we exist. That is core to what we got to do every day. What we were trying to focus on here is what are the strategic priorities that the city of Las Vegas should focus on. Additional focus.
I believe that's
right, to go to the future. So and I've heard the argument, like there's an argument that says, when I wake up in the morning, I get a things to do list. I do not put getting dressed on that list, because that is fundamental. I just got to do it, and it's not worth declaring as a unique or different priority. It is part of why we exist. So that's one reason. Two, the other perspective that I'll just make sure you're aware of is that there was lots of discussion about how to deliver differently, right, over the next 3 to 5 years. Because again, the driving question is, what should we focus on strategically to move us forward? So part of the commitment, if you look under Iconic Las Vegas, there are some who participated in the process that would say that whole honor neighborhoods and improve continuously the experience of a resident is contained in one of the priorities under Iconic Las Vegas. So if you look at the second priority, create iconic public spaces for residents, including public art, sports, recreation, green space. So that's not the same as public safety, but what that suggests is this is what we're going to do even more, right, differently. Because as a basic obligation that we accept every day, just showing up, is being responsive, fixing potholes, all of that stuff. So that's why you don't see it on here. So I just offer that as information.
There is
If I can respond to that, that's true, but that's like a shotgun approach. It's scattered all over the place.
I just share it with you.
Yeah.
I just share it with you.
That's why I'd rather
We're going to
have
get
it.
your thumb in a minute.
I'd rather
I
have
just
it.
share it with you. Okay.
I got it.
I don't have.
Well, I think, thank you for recognizing me. I think what he's talking about, the councilman is talking about, is contained. It's just a different theme. Maybe there were arguments as how you aggregated this, because he is correct. Our biggest problems relate around the neighborhood that a person lives in. But it is contained under at-risk populations.
Well, that is
And
what
if you
some of
want
the
to
folks.
say, if you want to say that, can carry that discussion to that point, or you can say whoever aggregated could have put the neighborhood concerns into iconic, but I don't think that's what iconic means. I think that iconic means global things that recognize it's a symbol of the town.